For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi on the gist. We are looking at India's foreign satellite launches. Our guest today, we can now call him an in-house expert, Dr. Chaitanya Giri, who's the editor of our sister platform, Interstellar.news, and also the associate professor at Flame University. Chaitanya, thanks so much for giving us some time from Pune. We've been able to do some when you were in Delhi as well, interviews with you.
Yeah, thanks, Amitabh. Happy to be here with you on the gist for a change.
Just looking at the launch, Chaitanya, of the 1+6 co-passengers on the PSLV yesterday, the Singaporean satellites. Just give us a brief history in terms of the last few years. Now, clearly, momentum of launches seem to have picked up since, I think there were just a couple during the pandemic. But overall, do you think India's infrastructure and investment is growing fast enough so that at some point we can make a considerable dent in this market at least?
What has happened since the space reforms is that ISRO is now very much oriented itself towards the space economy aspects of the space activities, as we call them, and earning revenue more and more, sharing this revenue with the vendor base that ISRO has cultivated all these years is something that it is looking at. And as you rightly pointed out, the pandemic was not a very good phase for us. We just had two launches, and those two launches actually came, at the really last moment. Had the Russians not lost the contract of OneWeb, those two launch contracts wouldn't have come to us. So things have been we have been facing a lull all this while. And it is now time to pick up. We are now cultivating our private sector to sort of have their manufacturing line, their conveyor belt on a sort of a regular operating basis, because upkeeping them, giving them business sustenance is of great importance. The PSLV itself that we are discussing today will eventually get into the hands of the private sector, and the 3 or 4 biggest of the vendors will take charge of manufacturing it. So that includes L&T, Walchand Nagar, Godrej Aerospace, so on and so forth. So business sustenance is something that we'll have to look at. Fortunately, there are new markets emerging, especially in the global south, Africa and Southeast Asia. Singapore is one of our biggest clients outside North America and Europe. And until now, we've launched more than 20 satellites for them. And we hope the satellite customer base grows, the launch clientele grows tremendously, and we have as much share in this market as possible, because this is in the interest of the Indian space ecosystem.
Talking about interest, Chaitanya, one of our viewers, Jaideep Gadavia, has been posting a lot on YouTube saying he'd like these live chats more often so that viewers can ask questions or make their observations and comments. I wanted to flesh out each of those points that you mentioned in your opening answer. Do you think with the success that India has, with the cost effectiveness, is there enough interest and confidence in our launch ecosystem?
There's tremendous confidence. The PSLV has been quite a proven platform, and with its provenness, it instills a lot of confidence, especially in those customers who do not have the capacity to avail the American launch market or the European ones. The European launch market has been struggling for quite some time now, so they haven't launched as many satellites as they could have or they had earlier in the past. So they're either looking at North America or they're either looking at us. Then you have China as another market, But again, there are certain countries, there are certain companies who would really avoid going there for any kind of launches. And because there is a sort of a pariah status, which is usually given to the Chinese space ecosystem. They live with it. They don't have any complaints about that, but there is a clear divide in the global space launch clientele. Having said that, we are looking at, as I said, customer base in Africa who really can't, or in the global south, who really can't afford losing a satellite during the launching phase. And with that condition, any proven launch vehicle is actually earning more brownie points than a launch vehicle which is more attractive but is not as dependable. So dependability, reliability of the system is of great importance to all those countries who find it difficult to afford space activities, but they're slowly, taking baby steps towards in that direction. So I would say that reliability is a big factor for global south.
You've been saying global south, and you mentioned separately, of course, Singapore as one of our largest customers for these kind of satellites. Considering the competition that you were talking about across the globe, which countries in particular can benefit, are benefiting from India's launch expertise and capabilities? I mean, Brazil was one of them with Amazonia, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, of course. Brazil, it took us some time to entice Brazil. We did not launch many of their satellites in the phase between early 2000s and late 2010s, because Brazil was cooperating a lot with China at that point in time. And that was also the period when BRICS was beginning to grow. But better late than never, Brazil came to our fold. They thought of us as a service provider, and we offered them the services very well. Singapore, as you mentioned, yes, but must remember Singapore has been a model for several small countries and city states. So just like Singapore in the past 10 odd years, UAE has been quite at it when it comes to space technologies. And I believe UAE or countries in the Gulf region, in the Persian Gulf, the could be you know getting into the queue when it comes to launches. And we should be catering to their requirements as well. UAE is a new space agency. Saudi Space Commission has been making rounds of ISRO headquarters since the past 1 year or so. If I believe correctly, if I there were 2 or 3 meetings between the Saudi space community and the ISRO team in the past 1 year. Likewise, there is growing interest in cooperation with Oman. Omani space agency is also ramping up. All the countries in the West Asian region, they now have tremendous amount of wealth that has been generated out of petroleum exports, and they are now wanting to punt on the space sector, and that's the natural transition for them to undergo. So that's again a clientele for us. So we should be sort of cast a magic spell and get those clients also.
Talking about punting, where does India stand, not just in launching of these kind of satellites, but why not build, manufacture, design it for these countries as well?
I know that should be one of the priorities, especially with countries that are newly developing economies. Let's say, for example, early this year, the Kenyans launched a satellite with one of the Eastern European countries, and this was one of the first satellites to have been built in Kenya by a Kenyan team. Now, a similar pursuit. I mean, they can carry out a similar pursuit with us. Why not us? Why not build satellites with Indian companies? And this is where India sort of has reoriented its approach, and it does not want these companies or these countries to have a direct line with ISRO, because ISRO is now focusing entirely on R&D. But we are now making sure that the gates to our space companies open up, because at the end of the day, it is these space companies who are going to build these satellites for these kind of customers. I don't have great expectations from Western Europe or North America because they already have inherently a very mature space ecosystem. They build their satellites very well. And unless and until there is any company in these regions which is actually wanting to have a cost effective proposition, or it is aiming for a strategic cooperation with any of our companies, they're not going to come to us anytime soon. So for us, the low-hanging fruits are countries in Africa, countries in South America, in the Southeast Asian region, Central Asia. I think we should have better outreach for our space companies into these regions so that our space companies can build satellites, offer them services, downstream services in the remote sensing domain, in the satellite communication domain, so on and so forth. So the market is heating up tremendously, and we are late to the party, but the party is not over yet.
Right. And when you're talking about outreach or promotion, a question again from a viewer I was mentioning a short while back, Jaideep Gadavi, who says, what kind of lead can InSpace take in all this, or is InSpace doing in all this?
Yeah, InSpace is taking a lead in this. As you realize, the InSpace is an acronym for Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center. So the promotion directorate in space is at this point in time studying how to take our companies overseas, and how to make sure that our companies are not only relying on our Indian inherent domestic market, but also they get access to other markets, because that is the only way our companies can sustain internationalization. Making those overseas strategic investments is something that we'll have to think seriously. And InSpace, it is just a year-old agency, and it has started thinking on those lines. But it's not just the role of InSpace. You know, a lot of space diplomacy happens on track 2 level, outside the government. So where companies sign MOU between each other, we need to keep a tab on those kind of MOUs. We need to keep a tab on the academia industry collaboration. And these collaborations do not necessarily happen in the same country. They can happen in a cross border manner. So a lot of things need to be ironed out as we proceed. Another thing that I can think of, another major hindrance that I can think of is, if you look at the harmonic system code when it comes to import and export of certain commodities and processed goods, you'll find that spacecraft and missiles are put in the same category. Now, this is a big hindrance for exports of spacecraft, because missiles technology in itself comes under export control, and unnecessarily clubbing these two, sort of hinders our market access to many countries. So I think we should put in an effort on a variety of levels. This is not just about technology, but this is also about streamlining a lot of policy related issues here in India, as well as champion these issues globally.
Just going back to early Sunday morning's launch of the PSLV, Chaitanya, the fourth stage, which was lowered in orbit. Could you explain the significance of that to our viewers?
So this particular satellite again launched on early morning that day. Beautiful launch. Firstly, I must congratulate ISRO that they are now offering us a really clear footage of all the launches. It's not a granular, video that we used to see all this while.
And majorly, there's a slow motion one as well.
There's a slow motion one. It's HD,
Yeah.
which our users are enjoying a lot, because they used to compare our launches and its videos with the videos that come from NASA or other countries. So, firstly, kudos to them. They've heard a lot of murmurs and voices that we've been piquingly speaking of. Having said that, the 6 satellites that were launched, the Singaporeans, see, they all come from a variety of entities. So the primary satellite is built by the Israelis. It's a synthetic aperture radar for the government of Singapore. It has certain strategic purposes. We don't know what. Let's not get into that. But that's the primary satellite. Then you have a satellite built by a Singaporean startup. There's a satellite built by a Singaporean university. There's one experimental satellite It has no commercial purposes as such. And all these have been deployed at various altitudes in the low Earth orbit. And this is something that has been a forte of PSLV. If you remember the 104 satellites that were launched in one go, we have the capability of using PSLV for launching numerous satellites in one go. And this is something that has been very beautifully demonstrated by this particular launch again. And Where it stands out is that, in the past few years, there has been an emphasis on building small satellite launchers, something that can carry less than 300 kilograms in one go, and something, a rocket that can be assembled in a quick succession. Now, you don't need that kind of launch vehicle unless you have a certain sense of urgency in launching some satellite. Let's say if you have a constellation and one of those satellites in that constellation breaks down, you want to replace that satellite immediately. Then a small satellite launcher serves the purpose. But PSLV has a very bright future. It will compete with these small satellite launchers in the coming years only if we change the business approach to it. And the business approach is that, look, we have a really proven system that can launch as many satellites as possible in the low Earth orbit, or it can put these satellites also in the middle Earth orbit, which is slightly above 2000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. And it can do that beautifully. This is something, or this aptitude or capability does not come to PSLV's peers, and we should be banking on it really well in the coming years.
Sure. Just again to remind you, wanted to get your fix on the significance of why the fourth stage was lowered in orbit regarding space debris. If you could explain that to our viewers.
Okay, so again, the low Earth orbit is quite populated when it comes to satellites. The number of satellites is now exceeding 4,000 or 5,000 in that zone. And there are inhibitions placed by the international community to not sort of create any cascade effects or damages in these low Earth orbits from the fourth stage, because of the fourth stage. So that's why the fourth stage, which contains all these 4 or 6 satellites, it opened up uh, at a slightly lower altitude, and then these satellites were deployed and they were going in an upward direction. So, in the earliest years, when there were not as many satellites in the LEO, this fourth stage used to open at much higher altitude and it used to again fall down, but not anymore. So, these are the kind of restrictions that are coming because of a really populated LEO. And again, this is a major, major achievement that ISRO has been able to sort of very it has been able to make PSLV very agile, if I may say so. Uh, it can do whatever is it is tasked to do, and that's a wonderful attribute for any rocket to have. Rockets are really rigid structures with rigid functioning, but PSLV is showing really outstanding agility when it comes to functionality and operations.
So just again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fourth stage usually would have stayed up for what, something like 2 decades, but now it comes down in 2 months and burns up. That's the
And
idea of
yes,
less space debris.
yeah, that's the idea, because these are called as spent stages of the rocket, because once it's up there, it does not serve any function. It is not transmitting anything, receiving anything. It is just a debris, and a large chunk of a debris. So it is very important for these stages to come back again. Although PSLV is not a reusable system, but recalling this fourth stage and making it fall into the oceans is the best that we can do with such a multi-stage rocket system.
Well, it's probably coincidental, but just a day after that, I wanted to get your reaction to what Australia's space agency has said on social media, on Twitter. Doesn't seem very happy with ISRO. explain the stage 3 now debris that, and again, I think it was an old PSLV debris that, according to the Australians, has washed ashore.
So I feel that particular debris is very old, because if you look at the image over here, that object has a lot of barnacles. These are these small crustaceans that usually grow on the hull of the ship or the underbody of the ship or a submarine, or any body that is floating around in the sea for a very long time. And such barnacles grow when any object, metallic or wooden, is lying on the ocean floor for a few months at least. So what does the visuals say? This particular object has been lying in the waters for a very long time. So this is not a recent object. And this has not fallen onto the Australian shores. Rather, it has sort of washed off and come onto the shores of Australia. If you look at the Indian Ocean, and if you really understand the oceanography of the winds and the currents in the Indian Ocean, Western Australia has a gyre, a current that comes very close to it, where a lot of objects that are floating or a debris that is floating in the Indian Ocean washes and it comes on shore in Western Australia. If you remember the very unfortunate Malaysian Airlines aircraft that fell into the waters, some of the parts came onto the Australian shores. And that is again because of the gyres, because of the current that usually flows there. So this is not something that has fallen onto Australia. This has come on the shores, and it hasn't caused any damage as such. What the Australians are right now treating is they are invoking the Outer Space Treaty system, and perhaps they are hinting at the Liability Convention. Okay, so Liability Convention sort of has certain clauses which talk about the compensations that a country owes when a certain rocket part or a satellite damages the other country's satellite or any other asset, ground-based or space-based asset. So they're invoking that. But let's see how it goes. But I think our satellites or launch vehicles are not causing any damage. And if you look at the stages of the PSLV, once they are ignited in Sriharikota, the bottom stage, the fourth stage, falls off very close to the Indian shores, as well as the second and the third stage. So, if I'm not wrong, the third stage might have fallen off somewhere between Sriharikota and the islands of Andaman and Nicobar, whenever it was launched, whichever launch it belongs to, whichever rocket it belongs to, this particular object. It might be from now, or it might be also from 2016, 17, 18 or so. So this hasn't fallen on to Australia. Now let's see how India and Australia manage this. Both the countries are comprehensive strategic partners. They're very friendly with each other. The two space agencies are friendly with each other. And I'm pretty sure that this particular, it's a small issue. It will be solved amicably. But there are lessons to learn for ISRO. Howsoever successful PSLV is, uh, PSLV or the multi-stage rocket system is an outdated system. The world is very quickly moving on to reusable systems. It is very quickly moving on to two-stage to orbit, where you don't have as many parts falling apart from the rocket into the oceans. And with the two stage, it is now possible, as you see from the SpaceX launch vehicles, the bottom stage can easily come and land onto your land or onto sort of a barge or a barge or a platform, something very easily. So I guess the whatever has happened today, whatever Australia has spoken formally, officially from this tweet, we will be pushed eventually to abide by the emerging challenges, and sustainability is an emerging challenge. And what I foresee is that space sustainability is going to become a major issues, and all those countries who do not abide by certain sustainability clauses that would be decided upon in the coming years, And when I say sustainability clauses, I mean sustainability in the Earth's orbit, so that one satellite or any part from it does not affect any other satellite. Or, as you rightly pointed out in your earlier question, the spent stage, it does not create any damages. So it does not create any cascade effects. So these sort of issues need to be addressed immediately. And systems that we build will have to inherently become agile. PSLV has already shown that agility, as we spoke. And eventually, I feel that the next generation of ISRO rockets should become reusable, and so that they do not cause any damage to anyone. And I'm pretty sure that no one in Indian space ecosystem is intentionally doing all this. Uh, yeah, so this is part of this is the nature of the beast. The multi-stage rockets were built in a certain fashion, and that's the reason why we've always had launch sites along the coastline, be it Cape Canaveral in the US or Vandenberg Air Force Base in California on the other side, French Guiana, so on and so forth. So these are, very perplexing times. These are very challenging times, and I see a lot of a rapid pace of evolution of space tech happening, and India should be keeping pace with it.
Talking about, Chaitanya, this rapid pace of evolution, you mentioned earlier that there were two launches because of the pandemic, and subsequently now we are getting back to where we should have been. What about the private sector? Again, I think private startups, I was reading somewhere, there were probably just a handful of them before the pandemic, and now they are almost between 400 and 500. When can you expect the private sector to step up, or be allowed to step up, or to grow into having PSLV like platforms, or even the next generation platforms?
So, as we speak, the PSLV is already getting transferred from the PSU, which is the New Space India Limited, and it will eventually get transferred to a conglomerate of three or more companies, an alliance of three or more companies in India. So that will get privatized eventually. Satellites are already being built by the private sector. And when the government reinforces that many of our space components are built indigenously, uh, what it means is that these components are built by Indian industry, by the Indian private sector as well as the public sector. So we'll have to create a few champions here. And I'm of the opinion that yes, startups, some of them will really grow big, but as they grow big, the large Indian conglomerates, the big business families, will have to step up. Look at the South Koreans, look at the Japanese. Japanese have been pushing their Zaibatsus, which are their large corporations. So Mitsubishi is one of the biggest space companies in Japan. It builds its satellite, it builds its launch vehicles. Similarly, in South Korea, it's the chaebols, which are right now contributing heavily into the South Korean space economy. Likewise, Indian large companies will have to step up. The Tatas, the Godrejs, the L&Ts, the Reliances of the world, they'll have to step up, and they'll have to make sure that they make those strategic investments. Now, I'm pretty sure that they are waiting for that one lucrative business opportunity to enter the space market, because none of them, or at least many of them, have not had an experience of working in this sector, because the sector itself was closed by the government. But they will eventually get in, and it is the money that they earn, these companies as well as the startups, that will eventually matter a lot in the innovation of the space technologies. So rapid evolution of space technologies in India cannot happen without these companies and startups. They'll have to work hand in hand.
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about China's space program, as a lot of areas or countries looking at pariah status because of various other reasons of how China behaves. But explain to us the difference, because there is a huge technological differential between India and China in that sector as well. Explain to us the difference between India's space program and the priorities that we are showing, and China's.
So just look at the launch vehicles that these two countries have been using and for a pretty long time. What are the biggest achievements of China? If you look at the past 20, 23 years or so, biggest achievement has been firstly, they've been able to demonstrate human spaceflight, number one. They've been able to launch numerous military satellites that cater to their geostrategic ambitions. And these military satellites range from optical, SAR, electro-optical, infrared satellites. More recently, they have launched something that is a satellite that is enabled in blockchain technology. Now, they are not here to earn revenue like we are. So Indian space program is very mercantile in that fashion. It wants to earn revenue, it wants to earn customer base, it wants to ensure that it provides services to friendly countries. That is not the case with China. China hasn't had great number of uh, customer base. Uh, in the past, as I said, it has launched satellites for the countries like Brazil or Nigeria or so on and so forth, but it has never earned partners from Western Europe or North America. And that is where India is an advantage, where it is seen as a more friendlier spacefaring country, a more amenable spacefaring country, whereas China is seen more as an aggressive spacefaring country, but one that has end-to-end capabilities. It is not looking to earn revenue from space. So for us, space is a area of revenue, but for them, space is an domain of hegemony. And that's where the attitudes differ.
We've seen already till what tomorrow is 1st of August, what the Indian space program has done. What's on the horizon for the rest of the year? If you want to just do a quick roundup.
So immediately this particular month we have the landing of Chandrayaan. Then you have Aditya L1 mission. That's India's first solar space-based solar observatory. It has been in the works for the past many years. The launch has been deferred numerous times, and finally it is seeing the light of the day, and it will be launched very soon. Thereafter, there are quite a few launches, especially on the PSLV, and we'll see a launch every month. I'm of the opinion that such kind of launches should get as boring as a train that leaves from a railway station. It should be as boring, and that is a mark of success.
Makes a lot of sense. Professor Chaitanya Giri, editor of Interstellar.com, Interstellar.news, which is our sister platform, and associate professor at Flame University. Again, thank you for your time and your expertise. And there's a comment from one of our viewers, Gubi Balaji, who says, excellent talk in progress, and he was enjoying it. So thanks from his side as well.
Thank you so much.
And for all our viewers, do send in your feedback. There's a link in the description. I'll flash it on the screen as well. If you'd like to help support us, you can do that. If you have any topics in mind that you'd like us to discuss, do send that to us as well. Follow us on our social media handles for the latest articles that we put up on our website. Now, there are 3 sister ventures: StratNews Global, Interstellar.news, the editor who we just spoke to, and of course, Bharat Shakti. And you can get all the latest on all the interviews that we put up on all these 3 platforms, digital platforms, on their respective YouTube channels. This is The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi.